is here. Vineet is here. Let's start it. Not that Brian needs any introduction. I would still try to introduce him. He started building communities when I wasn't even born in 1990s. so like he's the OG of communities from where I look at from, and he's a host of podcast In Before the Lock. If you haven't heard In Before the Lock, you must. It's a source for anything. If you're ever stuck in community field, if you're stuck at anything, just go through those podcasts. You'll find your answer. Our host for today is Vineet Nandan Gupta. He's a community strategist. He's also a podcast host. His podcast name is Be Impactful. He is bringing change in the Indian community industry. He is teaching people, he's mentoring them how to go about it. And yeah, he's just nailing it in the industry. So I won't take much more of your time. Vineet, you can take it from here.
Vineet, one suggestion, like because it just started and it just 8:34, I think few more people will be joining in. So like why don't we, like, you go slow, like for 5 minutes, and before Brian start dropping a lot of knowledge bombs, like have 5 more minutes and then start the real one. Like I think Indians are still joining and they will take some time to join. So please give us some time, and it'll be good number of people. Thank you.
That's true, Paras, but we are community builders, and once we start talking, we keep on talking, and that's where the knowledge bombs, it simply crops up. So let's see how this pans out. I mean, super excited about it. All right. So Brian, first of all, congratulations on taking up this new role as SVP New Products at Commsor. All right. The last time when you came on Community Folks, pandemic was like in between. It was like 3-4 months into the pandemic, and we were understanding how community industry is going to evolve and span out. So I've heard your August 2020 community trends, which we spoke on our last knowledge bomb session. Followed by the fact that in December 2020, you specifically mentioned in the podcast that you have been part of multiple community builders engagement around the globe. All right. And I specifically heard listening to Mumbai, and that's where I connected. I'm like, I was there in Mumbai, and that's where it was part of the Community Folks thing. And today you are out here. So how has the journey been like from an OG community builder's perspective? Because we are still learning out here.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think for as many things have changed, as many of those things have also stayed the same. So I think the core tenets of, for me, what community building is, what, why it's important, why we do it, how we do a lot of the tactical and strategic delivery of it, have all remained largely the same in my mind, with, some tweaks along the way. The things that have changed is obviously the world around us and other people getting excited about it, and sort of their willingness to, be interested in it and want to learn, and companies really coming to the fore and wanting to build community. So I think, in a way, we've just been training for, a couple of decades for this, moment here. And now it's really incumbent upon us to capitalize on it and make sure that we're making the best out of the opportunity that we have. I will also say that I think, when the pandemic came and we were making all these predictions and people were all excited about community, there was sort of people were kind of thinking, oh, well, maybe this will just be a short-term thing, right? And then people will go back to not caring or, whatever. And I just haven't seen that be the case. I see the momentum still carrying through. I see plenty of companies still, very much at the beginning of all of this and trying to figure out what they should be doing and how to do it. And I think that's why you see the market for community consultants kind of expanding. A lot of people jumping in, a lot of that going on. So I think, like I said, it's just, we should look at it as an opportunity always, and just figure out how we can make the best of it.
All right. Guys, a quick plug-in. Why don't you introduce yourself in the chat section so that there can be an active engagement out there? And feel free to ask your questions. I'll pick it up from there once we have some questions out here for Brian. And that's how we'll take it up from there, from here. So Paras, do we have a lot more Indian folks who have joined in, or are we still willing to wait for a while before we
Let's
take?
go. Let him fire the knowledge and let all of us get something. Like, you know, I want to end my week with some crazy knowledge. I think something very important. So let's go for it. Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Brian, I'll start with something which is going on pretty latest in the entire tech ecosystem and industry. So WhatsApp launched its community feature. All right. And considering the fact that most of the India is on WhatsApp, I mean, if they have a smartphone and an internet connection, WhatsApp is the place to go to. Additionally, a lot of organizations tried moving out people from WhatsApp to other platforms, and most of them were unsuccessful, considering the fact that some of them who were like tech savvy, they moved on to Telegram and Slack, but still WhatsApp remains the primary source of communication. So with WhatsApp launching its community feature, what is your take on it?
Yeah, I saw this, this morning here, my time. I'm certainly not an expert on everything they introduced, but I think there's a few key things here. I think number one, this is very regional, right? In the United States, WhatsApp is almost nowhere, right? Like some people use it usually to communicate with their friends in Europe or, something like that, but it's just not really popular. So that news here in America is kind of like, just not an impact at all. On the other hand, certainly in other regions and in India, WhatsApp's huge. And so there may be some impact there. But I also think, as I see this kind of news, and I see it with Slack and with Discord and these kinds of things, it's kind of amusing to me to a degree, where a lot of the features, that they're announcing and triumphantly, we did it, are things that we had, 20 years ago or whatever, not to be like the old man yelling at a cloud or whatever here, but, it's, these are table stake things to me, right? These features and functionality. And I think what you find is, and my experience has been, kind of when I was still doing the consulting stuff, is that there's a scale at which it doesn't work anymore. So you may have a Facebook group or a WhatsApp group or a Slack channel or a Discord or whatever. And I think that's fine, right? Like it's a great way to start a community very cheaply with very little friction. And as you said, most people already have those apps, so they understand them. But once you get over, 3, 4, 5,000 people in a product like that, usually that's where it kind of becomes untenable to manage it. And some of that is just the overall design of how how they're built and how they categorize information and discussions. But a lot of it is also just feature functionality from an administration and management standpoint. Like what was the headline feature of WhatsApp's thing today? Oh, you can delete messages now in a group. It's like, you're going to need a lot more than that, when you get over 5,000 people in a group somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, that's to get to a scale, it will definitely be a challenge for the community builders to organize it. And considering the fact that Indian community ecosystem is still evolving and growing, this looks like a growth scale challenge or a maturity challenge compared to the starting up sort of scenario, because when the companies are looking to experiment with community and the time which it is needed to actually build it up, it is a considerable amount of time which it needs to mature. So that's perfectly true. All right. So I'll give you an example from the Indian ecosystem. A few weeks ago, I was listening to Jishan, who is a co-founder of My Captain, and it's a fully funded startup. So what Jishan was mentioning that he is planning to put in more resources into the community-led ecosystem from the product-led growth. All right, and see, because in the edtech space, they are seeing a lot of value which the community is giving to the startup per se. So how has your experience been, both as a consultant as well as a senior member of the community team around multiple enterprises? How is this community-led movement spanning out globally?
Yeah. Well, first I'll say that I think there's a lot of overlaps between what we have classically called product-led growth and now community-led growth. So there's a lot of things about that mindset that I think are similar. Of course, we're gearing it more towards community in this particular case, but I think there's still some confusion around this, and I think we just need to do a better job of clarifying for people what we mean by it. But I think, what we're seeing is a lot of companies have come to the realization that many of us had years ago, but it's okay. Like, it's fine. They're coming to it now, is that, your community can be more than just a support forum, right? Like, it can help you actually drive a lot of what you do in product, in service, in, innovation, and a lot of things around your company. And so it's really, I think, kind of two things. One, the mindset shift of how do we, put our community at the center and have them help us do those things. And then two, just the expansion of use cases, right? When you build a community, thinking through all of the things that it can do, not just, one use case or something like that. So I think it's important to define it first. And hopefully that, kind of helps people understand. And of course, if you go to communityled.com, there's a bunch of, more documentation and more things to sort of digest there about that. So I think a lot of companies are coming into that. And I think there's a few key reasons. I think number one, a lot of founders of companies are, of course, younger people that grew up with this stuff, right? It's not something they had to learn. It's actually something they inherently know because they've been using these apps and communities and whatever since, they were born essentially and got on the internet. So I think that's helpful, to push it forward, that it's not foreign to them. I think COVID, certainly helped give a push to that because people didn't have a choice. They had to figure out how to do things online. And I also think that from the community side of things, we've just been around long enough now that we've been doing it and we have the proof of the value that it can bring. And we're just better at telling the story than we used to be. So I think all three of those things have sort of built this confluence to get us where we're at today. And as you mentioned, sort of the, kind of global acceptance, of what community is and why it's important, and seeing more people becoming community led, or at least beginning that journey, right? I think it's a very long journey and I don't want to claim victory, right? I think a lot of people are still at the very, very beginning of all this.
That's 100% true. Like, for example, I have been part of the startup and the community since last 7 years, and it looks like I'm just scratching the surface, let aside how deep we can get into it. All right. So with that, the next question comes for talent. So specifically, when we are looking at the Indian ecosystem as well as the other ecosystem which are evolving around the globe, organizations have suddenly realized that they need to have a community manager in their team, they need to have a community associate in their team, and other things. So what is it that an organization should look as a skill set as well as the leadership quality, which would be essential for to help them identify the talent, get them on board, and then the training process? So these are the two questions which I've combined: getting the talent.
Well, I think first and foremost, if I think about what I look for when interviewing or hiring community professionals, of which I've done a lot, over the years, and now mentoring people that are looking for jobs, there's sort of two major, I guess, buckets of components. One bucket is, of course, the community. Do they have community knowledge? Have they done community? Do they understand, tools and processes and all that stuff? But I think more importantly, is actually the people part of it and the personality. Like I can teach you how to moderate, right? I can teach you how to use a platform. I can teach you the best practices of a community. What I really can't teach people is personality and how they approach dealing with people. And do they like dealing with people and that whole thing. And so I would say, I would look for both of those things, but if I had to prioritize, I'd look more for the personality and the people part of this, because as we all probably know here, this can be a hard thing to do at times, to manage a community and handle different personalities, different, goals that people have, different things that go on. So you really have to love it, because if you don't actually love what you do in this particular case, you're probably not going to have very much fun doing community, and it's probably just going to wear you out. So that's what I look for. And I think, to the point about the skills part of it, the community experience and the skills, there's a shortage of that. There's no doubt about it. Like, there's so many companies trying to hire people, and a lot of them are pretty frustrated, to be honest, about, the people they're interviewing. Even if they find people with the people skills, they don't quite have the community knowledge and some of that. So I think that's where we're trying to solve that problem with, learning, with knowledge. I mean, that's the point of the podcast. Like Eric and I, that's why we do the podcast. That's why, C-School and CMX and, I know Carrie has her courses. So there's all kinds of different ways to, I think, learn the community skills part of it. And that's really, really important. And I guess that's my suggestion or advice to anybody that's looking to either get into community as a profession or to take what you're doing to the next level, is to seek out those resources and engage, in those learnings. The good news is that they exist. Like, those didn't exist 5-6 years ago, so it's great now that we have these things and you can access them, and there's avenues for people to level up what they're doing.
Yeah, that's 100% true, because way back in Jan 2021, when I gave the Facebook Certified Community Manager exam, a lot of the material which was shared by Facebook, I was like, I've already done it in my community professional career. It is just that putting a structure to it, a method to the madness, and making sure that how processes are set in so that you can scale. Additionally, there's resources which are available in your and Erica's podcast, as well as the other materials which are mostly available for free, has been a great sort of knowledge leveler. Although in some time in the future, I would definitely want to get into a formal program, but that seems like a long shot at this point of time. Having said that, when an aspiring community professional
I think he's frozen, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I'll check.
I can answer some of these questions in the chat if we want.
Let's go. Yeah, Brian, let's go for the questions.
Yeah. So
okay, cool. Let's see here.
I'll give you the first question.
Oh.
Okay, he's back.
We lost you for maybe a minute or two there, Vineet.
Okay. So I was like, how do community professionals who are looking for a job to decipher the job role, which is shared by the companies, and in terms of the headcount and what exactly to do? Because a lot of them are in the 1 to 3 years of experience, or fairly young in their community career. How do they decipher it? And when they go for the interview, what do they negotiate for?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'll say that, and I've been on all sides of this, right? I've been a hiring manager. I've been hired. So I've seen this, and what I've come to understand is that most of those job descriptions, no offense, right? But like, a lot of hiring managers don't actually know what they want or what they're supposed to be hiring for, and a lot of people will just go and copy and paste, other community job descriptions. And if it turns out that it says 1 to 3 years, then I guess it's 1 to 3 years. You know what I mean? Like, they don't really know. It's more just that's what they saw somewhere else or on some other company's site. And so there it is. It's 1 to 3 years. And so what I would tell job seekers is to not get too turned off by that or not be too discouraged by that. I would say still apply, still have conversations. The other thing you can do is if you have to tell a story, right? You have to, either way, no matter what their requirements are, you still have to tell a narrative around, here's the skills I have, here's how they're going to apply to what you do. And one of the challenges I've run into recently is a lot of job seekers that are just getting into community for the first time will say, well, I have some community experience, I kind of know what I'm doing, but I don't actually have it as a job title, as a previous job title on my resume. And so my advice in that scenario is, craft a narrative or a story around, hey, here's what I actually have done in the past. Maybe I didn't have the title of community manager or, whatever it is you're going for, but you should be able to say, look, I worked in marketing at this company and I worked in product at this company and I did this, this, and this, and this. And these are the experiences that I had throughout all of those jobs that have now prepared me, right, to be a good community leader, right? And kind of be able to tell that story and get around this whole notion of, oh, well, you haven't actually done it before. And it's like, well, actually, I kind of have, right? And I have a bunch of experience that can help me get there, even if I don't have the title specifically. What to negotiate? There's a lot of things, you should negotiate. We actually just put out a course that you can get for free on the C School site. So if you go there and take the survey, it's more about like salary negotiation. But I think the main thing that you want to, sort of talk about with people or negotiate is actually, I want to understand, where's this thing going, right? If I'm getting hired today as the only community professional, which is often the case at a lot of companies to start, I want to know, what are our plans? What triggers are there for us to hire more people or expand the team or get more budget or whatever, and start to kind of set up that mindset. In a way, you're interviewing them, to ask them about, what's the plan here? What do I need to do to make sure that we expand and that I'm not just stuck as the only person? So, there's a lot of things to talk about and negotiate, but I think it's really important to understand that part of it, so that you don't get 2 months down the road or whatever and sort of realize that it's not actually the right type of community role for you.
Thanks, Brian, for stating it out so lucidly. Adding to that question about building a personal brand. So for me specifically, and most of the community professionals around the globe, and Before the Log has been a repository or the goldmine of information of what we take, imbibe, and build through it. So how do you suggest that the community professionals get also active on platforms such as Twitter or LinkedIn or Reddit, anywhere where they can build up their skills, show their skills, put out the content, which makes it easier for them to, say to the world that, hey, I have done this. All right, so I can come over as a consultant and help you out, or I can come over as a member of the community team or as a leader of the community team and help you build it. So how has your experience been specifically from the building your credibility on the digital space from the creator economy perspective per se?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'll say that I'm not a good example of this. People often look at me and say, oh, well, you have this big following and everybody knows who you are, but that's a function of time for me, right? It's just because I've been around long enough, and that kind of a thing. And so, I don't know that what I did is exactly the model. I also think you need to decide for yourself if that's actually something you want to do or want to spend time doing. Some of the people that I hold in regard as the best community professionals have never tweeted in their lives. They don't ever talk about it. They don't ever go to conferences. They don't ever do any of these things. They're just really, really good at it. And they're okay not having some big brand or whatever. I do think, if you're trying to build your career, it can be useful, to have publicly available content, whether that be LinkedIn or, a podcast or a blog or speaking at conferences. Like, there's no doubt about it that those things are helpful in just having people know who you are, and what you're about, and being able to point to those examples when you're trying to get a job or whatever the case is. But I think it's an investment, and you have to decide if that's an investment that's worth it for you and your time and your personality type. Some people just don't really want to, be out there. So I think it depends on you and what you're trying to do, what kind of goals you have for your career and where you're at, which stage you're at. But I guess if you decide to directly answer the question, if you decide that you do want to do that and it's something you do want to do, just start doing it. There's all kinds of people that will try to sell you like how to become an influencer or, whatever. And it's all kind of bullshit, right? Like you just start doing it. You just start tweeting, you start going to conferences, you start a podcast, you write a blog, whatever you want to do, whatever's going to fit your time and personality, I think is what you need to do, and stay true to yourself. Don't try to do what someone else did, because it probably won't exactly work for you the way it did for them.
All right, great. Thanks for dropping those knowledge bombs, Brian. We will take a photograph, and then post that we'll take up the questions which has been shared to us by the members who are attending this. Plus, I have 2 questions from my friends out here. So, Akash, over to you, buddy.
Yeah, thanks, Vineet. If everyone can please turn on your camera for the next 2 minutes.
Everyone, let's get it clicked quickly. Yeah. Manohar, Pratmesh, Anusha, Anuj.
So many questions, good questions in the chat. I hope we get to answer these.
Yeah, I've them all recorded here, so we're not going to miss any of them.
Excellent.
Let's go.
Okay, just a few more people. Come on.
Divya, Anusha, Manohar, Chitra.
Manohar can't. I think he has some technical issue. So. Okay, I'll
go for it. Hi, Pratmesh. Let's go. 1, 2, and 3.
Community.
Akash, are you taking also?
Yeah.
Yeah, take 1.
Okay, everyone ready?
Yes.
3, 2, 1. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys, for showing us your lovely faces. It's very difficult to not look at the screen and talk. So this is this is something which is very much needed.
Just a reminder for everyone: if you need to leave mid-event, we are recording this event and we'll be sharing the recording in the mail and in the newsletter also. So if you have asked a question and you need to leave for some reason, you'll get your answer.
Thanks, Akash. So Brian, I have the first question from Varalakshmi. She states that why do organizations need a huge push to bring community into their ecosystem? What do you think they are missing? Irrespective of the fact that all of us are talking about community, what is that piece that they are missing?
Yeah, I think it's important for us all to remember that we do this stuff every day. And so to us, it's all kind of second nature, and, we're used to it, and we don't understand, why other people don't understand it. To them, it's brand new, like they've never seen it before, or they've only seen it a little bit. And so this is our job, right? Like we have to educate people about what this is, why it's important, what kind of value, the company can get out of it, and then how to go about it. And so that's kind of part of the job description, I think. And I think we all just have to accept that, frankly. And so, what do they need? I think they need someone with a vision. They need someone that can put a strategy together and lead them and say, look, if we do these 5 things, then we will get these 5 things out of it, whatever that looks like. You have to have a compelling vision and lead them down the path. I think just going into, a company and saying, well, why don't we do community here? Like we should just do it, doesn't really it's not enough to inspire people. And so we have to do a lot of work to educate, what that is. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So I think if you're, not enjoying the education part of this, you might be in for a rough ride. It's part of, trying to blaze new trails or, bring something new into a company. I'm sure, the first time a company did marketing, it was probably the same thing. Like, what is this? Why are we doing this? What do you mean we're doing advertising? Now it's second nature, but they've had 100 years, to figure that out. So I think we all have to keep that in mind, that we're at the very beginning here in most people's minds.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. The second question I have from Manohar is like, how can Indian community manager who love your work can join forces with you? What are the ways to collaborate with you to learn, work, understand everything?
Yeah. Well, so I try to do my best to put out as many, free things as possible, to help people. I have this small problem, which is that I'm not scalable, right? I am yet one human being. And so we do our best, right, to put as much of our knowledge out in various forms, right? Whatever that is. Most of it free, of course, C-School and those things have some cost associated with them. But, in terms of engaging with me in particular, as much as I have time to do it, I'm happy to, meet with people sometimes. I'm happy to provide some mentoring. I'm, whatever I can find time to do. But I would say the main thing is just engage with me online, Twitter and LinkedIn and stuff like that. I tend to have a little bit more ability to do that just because it's asynchronous. I also think if you join a lot of you are probably in the community club Slack, but oftentimes I'll answer questions in there, or, I'm in there all the time. And if I have time, I answer questions and help people out with things. So those are probably the main ways, but I'll also say that don't limit yourself to me, right? There's so many like really awesome people in this industry that share things and they make time, for things and will help people. So, I would say like seek out a diversity of people because I think they all have some really interesting things to share and different perspectives than I have as well.
All right. Awesome. So are you going to write a book anytime soon?
I get this question all the time, and maybe someday, I don't know. It's not something that's on my radar right now. I think there's a lot of like good books already around sort of the, tactical stuff in community from, Rich and David and Carrie and everybody else. So I wouldn't want to just repeat, what they've already said. On the podcast, I think there's like 70 hours of content now on there. So I'm not sure what I would say that I haven't already said, through the podcast. I know that maybe people want to read instead of listening or something like that, but, maybe someday. But right now I'm just really focused on helping build people as much as I can. And of course, doing my day job over at Commsor that's got a bunch of really interesting stuff we're kind of working on in the background. So maybe someday, but not right now, probably.
Cool. Great. I get that. Hannah has a question that are there mastermind groups which you would recommend to be part of to build yourself as a community professional?
Well, like I said, I think Community Club and CMX, both of the Slack channels are pretty good to help with that. I think you can learn a lot in there. Jake McKee has a thing called it's a Dinner 5 that he does, and I think it's largely been. It was in the US for the most part, but I think with COVID, he's doing virtual sessions now. So take a look at Dinner 5, and that's sort of a kind of a masterminds type of thing where he brings together, I think, 8 to 10 people, maybe like once a month or every couple of months or something. And then you get invited to sort of the private Slack afterwards. And there's kind of a group of people in there. So that's an interesting one. I know that on Twitter, I was trying to think of Crystal Wu started a community like group there where people are kind of engaging and asking questions. It's called Community Builders. Let me see if I can find a link here. Yeah, here, I'll put the link in the chat on that one. So that one's kind of interesting. So yeah, I would just try to seek out as many as you can, and some may be for you, some may not, but they're out there. You just got to go find them, and then find the time to participate is probably the biggest challenge for people.
Yeah, that's 100% true. I mean, I have restricted to 4 pro bono engagements a month. Apart from that, it's basically a paid consulting project, which I'm taking up as an independent consultant. So yeah, time is a very critical factor. Having said that, Chitra has asked a question in the chat that what is the correlation between community and customer success manager, and how do they look up the ladder in the professional career?
Yeah, it's a good question. I have long believed, so I don't know if people know this or not, but in addition to consulting, I was a customer success manager back in the day for like 5 or 6 years at my time at Lithium. And I think there is an incredible amount of overlap actually between community, customer success, customer experience, customer support. I don't tend to see these as like wholly separate things. I think there's some skills, inherent to each of those role types that are unique. But I actually always really like the idea of people either coming to or going from community from those different roles, because at the end of the day, we're all customer facing people, right? And so a lot of the skills are transferable. And I've really encouraged people to, kind of think about how those fit together, how you transfer people between them, but also just how we work together. I would say if you're building a community at a company and you're not, working with and leveraging support and success and those other customer facing groups, then you're probably missing an opportunity to do great things. So I think, as I said before, if you're trying to either go from community to CSM or from CSM to community, it's all about telling that story of, hey, here's what I learned in this role, and here's how it's transferable, to wherever you're going. But I think there's a lot actually.
Right. Thanks, Brian, for answering it so vividly. There's a question by Piper Wilson. It states that, would you please give some specific examples of community operations job? You had mentioned about CSS, and you have also mentioned about operations in other divisions. So she does not have a business experience, and she wants to, broaden her base to become much more relatable and
yeah, I would encourage everybody, and I'm going to try to find this while I'm talking about it. So observations from Cassie Mays and Tiffany Oda. So they have a series that they're doing pretty regularly where they talk about community operations, and they bring people together to talk about it. And I just put the link in the chat there. I think operations is becoming a bigger thing as community teams grow and there's more integration with the rest of the company and other systems and things like that. So I think if you're interested in that, I would check out Tiffany and Cassie's group there. But I also think in general, it's just, the best thing you can do is get exposure to as much of that stuff as possible and try to insert yourself wherever you can, into different projects or programs or things like that, so you can learn and get that experience and then apply it back to community. So that's kind of my recommendations, I guess, of how to get started with that. I think Eric and I did a podcast on operations a few episodes ago. So there's that. But a lot of it, this is another one that's super transferable. Operations in support or success or anywhere else in a company is certainly transferable back to community, because there's a lot of things that you do as an operations professional, I would say, that are very similar to what you would do in community, right? There's a lot of project management, program management, things like that are very applicable.
All right, great. So Divya has a question out here. As a community person, when said that as a company, we need engagement in our closed platform, what kind of support and areas of information should we ask support in? and also at the same point set it apart from all the other social media activities. So there is a big debate going on that social media manager is same as community manager, and there is a lot of frustration among the community professionals out here. So how do we segregate and build our case with an organization?
Yeah, I mean, for me, this all comes back to goals. You know, what are the goals of the organization? What are the goals of the community, and how do those line up to each other? A lot of people just jump in and say, "Oh, we need engagement. We need," and it's like, "But yeah, cool, but why? To what end? What does that mean? Why? Why are we doing it?" I think don't skip the goals step, right? I think if you skip the goals step, then it's easy to get trapped in just going off and building something and not really understanding the linkage between it and the business. And that's when trouble, begins, right? And the company's like, why are we doing this again? What's the point of this thing? So I think that's the biggest piece. I think when it comes to engagement in particular, there's a bunch of like best practices and things you can try. Where was that playbook? We had a playbook that we put out recently with like a bunch of engagement tactics that you may be able to use. So I'll try to find that and link that as well in the chat. But I think, ultimately it's just about experiments and really like trying things and seeing what's going to work. There's no real shortcut, I don't think, from my perspective, to how that's going to work. And you just have to try a bunch of stuff. And I know it can be frustrating, but I think over time you'll kind of figure out, what works and what doesn't, and where to, how to approach it, I guess, is the biggest thing.
All right, great. Akash, do we have any more questions? Have I missed something? Can you help me out, please?
We have a question from Chitra.
All right, just hold on. Yeah. So Chitra is asking, when we try to build community as a first line of defense for questions, most of the time support leaders see community as a threat. Your views on it?
A threat against support, or?
Looks like threat against support, because the community, support leaders are also, looking for their career progression. And when they say community, getting into it. So there is always sort of unpleasant situation.
Well, I've run community, I've also run support, and I've run them together. And what I've learned about this is when you do it properly, actually, the high tide can rise all boats. When we start talking about deflection and things like that, support people often get a little uncomfortable, because it's like, oh, are you going to replace me, or are we going to, lay off people or something? And I've actually found the opposite to be true. The function of community, when it comes to support, is actually to free up your support team to deal with harder problems, more challenging things, and spend their time supporting customers in the way that we should be supporting customers, instead of answering the same 15 questions every day, right? And so what I've actually seen is it helps the support team focus, it helps them manage their load, and it helps them grow, because when they're not busy answering the same 15 questions every day, now they have time to go grow their career, learn new things. And so that's the kind of programs that I put in place when I ran both community and support, is how do we take the time savings and actually turn it into a value for you? And we actually help them grow their careers, and grow what their knowledge was. And a lot of them ended up leaving support to go work in product or work in success or other areas of the company. So I think we have to be really, really careful when we talk about communities and support and the value it provides, to say, this isn't about, reducing headcount or any of that kind of stuff. It's actually about how do we make everybody better and provide better opportunities for people in support. Honestly, I've been doing this for, over 20 years, probably like 25 years now. I can count on one hand how many times I have ever seen a company actually reduce support headcount because the community was so effective. I just haven't seen it. It does not happen as often as you would think. And a lot of that is because the support team is just so overburdened as it is, that even if I take away a bunch of hours of work for them to do, it's not like all of a sudden they're sitting around kicking their heels up, not doing work. It just means that they're it's less crazy than it was before. So I think there's a lot of room there, to grow without ever worrying about how are we going to, downplay support. And I think as a support leader, you should welcome that. You should be happy, that your team is being given this gift essentially of time and space to do what you need to do.
Right. Awesome. So Brian, final question. I mean, we released a State of Indian Community Management report last year in 2021. All right. And you have seen community as an industry evolving in different geographies. So what is that one or two takeaway you want to share with us before we open the forum for anybody to come and ask questions? Because I am done out here.
Anything at all.
Anything.
Or anything. Oh my goodness.
Very open-ended questions.
Woo. Look, I think just keep going. I know this is like the most ridiculous thing to say, but like, I just think sometimes, you get caught up in the day-to-day work and how all of that goes. And you can lose perspective on the bigger picture of what you're trying to do and what what you are trying to do both for your community, but also for you in particular in your career. And I think, there's a lot of good information out there about community, but there's also a lot of noise, from a lot of people. And I think you kind of need to decide for yourself, actually, like what you want your, career to be and how you want to build community and what you value. So I guess that's really basic advice, but just don't, look at the longer term, right? Look at the bigger picture, look a couple of years ahead and say, where do you want to be and how am I going to get there? And try to do that, and I think that's kind of the best advice that I can give to people. The big secret is that people look at me and Erica and people like that and like, oh, they have it all figured out. We don't have anything figured out. We make it look good, but the reality is we've just been making it up for this whole time as well. And so, we're all in the same boat here. So don't get trapped into thinking that, other people have it figured out and you don't, and that you've somehow missed something, because it's not really true. Everybody's just faking it, until and sometimes things work out and it makes us look good or whatever. But I think it's important to understand that, you just need to do what you need to do to be successful. And if you do that every single day, then you'll probably end up in a good place. So I hope that's probably like vague in general, but hopefully it's a nice pep talk for people about, just keep going.
Yeah. Thanks, Brian, for sharing those lovely bombs of information and nuggets of knowledge. Akash, Paras, guys, feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions to Brian. We have a couple of minutes out here before we wind up this session.
Yeah, before I jump in, I would like to see if anyone else wants to ask the question.
I think Piper has already asked another one around training resources. And
yeah. So Piper's asking, are there any training resources for community consultants? So a word on consulting, right? So I see a lot of people getting into consulting right now. And I think that's great. I think, it's a sign of growth of an industry when there is an ecosystem of consultants around it. So I think that's a positive sign. But I will also say, and this is not to discourage anybody, but I think the reality is that there's a difference between being really good and really passionate about building communities and being a consultant. Right? Those are two very different things. And so I think you have to kind of understand if consulting in particular is something you want to do or that's going to be good for you, because it's a whole like industry unto itself, right? And a whole profession unto itself. And being good at something doesn't inherently mean that you're good at explaining it to other people and helping them go down the path, right? So I think, the best advice I can give here is there's actually a lot of resources for just consulting in general, out there. And I would kind of seek those out. There was a great podcast a couple of months ago, maybe, John O'Bacon, where I'm sorry, I don't remember who this person was, but the guy was like a long-term consultant, and him and Jono had a great conversation about what does it mean to be a consultant and what are the things you have to do? And so go look for that podcast with Jono, because I think that was a very clear expression in my mind of what you need to do to be a consultant. So I would go listen to that and kind of understand if that's a world, that you want to be in. But I will say that biggest thing, so here's the biggest advice I can give anybody about consulting is it's all about who you know. You're going to go build a website and you're going to tweet and you're going to go on LinkedIn and whatever. And that's great. 99% of the business that I had as a consultant, and I can say the same for Erica, is people that or someone that knows someone that's going to introduce you. And so this is the biggest challenge for consultants when they start out, is they build the website and they launch it and then I'm a consultant now. And no one really knows who they are yet, or they don't have a network that's big enough to exploit to actually get enough business to make it viable long-term. So you have to really be careful about that. And I think that's why you see people become consultants and then not be consultants within, some period of time, is just because, they sort of run out of the 2 or 3 people in their network that need consulting, and then they're done. Right. So you have to just constantly be building a network. So anyway, I won't rail on further about consulting, but that would be my advice if you're thinking about getting into that type of a business.
Lovely. Thanks, Brian. I think similar thoughts on the consulting part. Network is very important.
Yep. Yeah. And for Piper, I see, she's saying, well, I'm part of a company. I think my advice is still the same about just look for general consulting, advice and people who have done podcasts and books and whatever. But there's really no substitute for doing it either, right? I think you can read a lot and take in a lot of information. I think the more you do it, the more you learn, and the clearer it becomes what you need to do, to become a successful consultant.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Guys, anybody just unmute yourself and ask the question.
Okay, so if no one else has a question, Brian, I was in the cohort that just finished, and I attended your lecture on the community leadership. And now that we see in the Indian community industry, a lot of people are going on that level, on the leadership level. I would like for you to, give us some knowledge on that. I can't share the slides that you shared with us, but if it comes directly from you, it will be really good.
Yeah. Well, we have 5 minutes, so I'll do my best to give, let me tell you about leadership in 5 minutes, right? And so let's see here. How can I boil this down to something good for this time? So I think, oftentimes what happens is people look at their career and they say, what's the next step for me? And the way that most companies are organized, right? You get to a point where it feels like the next step is I need to become a manager or I need to become a leader, right? Because that's just the next level on the org chart of our company. And so a lot of people, covet and get that promotion or, step into a role like that, not understanding that, it's a whole different job. It's a completely different job. You still have to know what you're doing from a community perspective so you can lead a team of people that are working on community. But now you have to become a leader and a manager. And so that requires a lot of mindset shifts, right? A lot of different thinking about what your job is now. You typically go from being a tactician to a strategist, from a specialist to a generalist, from a individual contributor to a leader. And that requires a lot of thinking and changing how you approach the world and ultimately what your actual job is. And so I think that's the biggest thing I can tell people is you really have to understand, do you actually want to be a leader, and a manager? Because it's not right for everybody. And like I said before about community, to be a people manager, you have to really want to do that job. You have to really like that job, because if you don't, it's really, really hard, right? It's really, really hard. It's a lot of work. But it can be really rewarding if it's something you're interested in. So I think the mindset shift is the first one. The second one is thinking about, again, like being more strategic in how you approach community and how you use your position as a leader in the company now, or, you know, whatever that is, to promote the community and help other areas of the community understand. It's a lot of the stuff that Eric and I talk about all day, you know, on the podcast, right? Is like, how do you leverage your influence now and your higher stature and position and title and all that stuff, and channel that, you know, to make the community better and help your team achieve their goals, both professionally and personally as community professionals, right? So that's sort of like the really short version. I mean, we have whole 12-week courses on this, you know, because there's just, and it's probably still not enough. I mean, there's so much around this, but I think that's the important part, is that you're not going to just like get a director title and like go back to doing the same community work you were doing before. It's actually going to be probably a very different job than you were doing. And a lot of people, I think, you know, have a hard time wrapping their head around that until they get chucked into it. And then it's, you know, pretty tough. So, yeah. I also see the question I want to answer. I know we have 2 minutes. I see the question here about sports communities. So here's what I want to say about sports communities. I like this question because it is beyond me. I will never understand why more teams and leagues and, you know, groups of people that just like different sports. It's kind of weird, isn't it? That like community hasn't really, I think, in some places, in some ways, yes, mostly like enthusiast style communities about specific sports. I just don't see as many like sports communities as I would expect to, which is strange to me, because talk about like having an audience of people, you know, if like massive fan bases of different teams. And I just don't get it. I think teams and leagues have just decided that like, oh, well, people already do that anyway on Twitter, so we don't need to pay attention to it. If I was a sports league or a sports team, I would be investing significantly in sports. So there's my sort of rant, I guess, on sports teams. What was the actual question here about how can they impact the organization? Yeah, I think it's about harnessing the fandom, you know, that people already have for your team and bringing them together in one place. I also understand the toxicity of fan bases and the potential moderation issues around that, which may be one of the reasons why, you know, there's not as many as I would hope there is. But yeah, it's a crazy missed opportunity, I think, for a lot of sports organizations. So anyway, sports.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Brian. Lovely having you out here again.
Yeah, happy to do it anytime.
And thanks everyone. Thanks for joining in. And we keep on doing these Chronicles of Community Builders, and all these star community people have been coming as of now. So do join in, and even we host Retro Meets Metro every Friday, last Friday of the month, which is like the existing community managers of community folks meeting the new ones. So if you are just open for a chill session to meet other community builders, you are most welcome. And once again, thank you so much, Brian, and keep doing for the industry, keep doing for all of us. And yeah, better together, I think. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah.
Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Great weekend. Thanks for joining, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.